that with CBDC as a replacement or a digital currency, they can make the rules of how the currency is used, and they can enforce the rules centrally. Let that sit in centrally. So one great activist said that the implementation of the passports is the end of human liberty in the West, and that is in fact true if we let this control grid go in. Robert F. Kennedy says you can't stop tyranny by complying. And so what I ask you, we cannot comply with the mandates, we cannot comply with the passports, we cannot comply with any part of a financial control grid, whether they change the name from passports and do it with biometrics and ID, whichever way they do it. So this is the fight for freedom and liberty. And what I will tell you again as an investment advisor, most of our wealth in the West comes from the benefits of freedom. And when you give away freedom, you give away anything. When the World Economic Forum says it's 2030 and you have no assets and you're happy, what I hear is it's 2030, we have stripped you of your assets, which may include stripping you of your children, and you're mind controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, don't let that happen.
Collapsing. Banks are collapsing. Crypto banks are collapsing.
Your ATM is safe. Your banks are safe. There's enough cash in the financial system, and there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. An infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. An infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve.
Don't you want somebody love? Don't you need somebody love?
And companies that facilitate the purchase of crypto assets are being regulated into the ground. And it's all been happening in the last few weeks. It's escalating. And it became even more obvious when we were where we were headed a couple of weeks ago when the Fed announced their new instant payment processing service called FedNow. This is the Fed's new system that offers instant payments 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whew! Just in time, because that's what I've been looking for. It begins in 3 months. It opens up April 1st, but you can be a part of it in July. So what does it even mean? Well, the Fed released a nifty little animation to explain it to all of us dummies. Come on, Wally, let's watch.
How will the FedNow service work? Imagine the owner of a coffee shop is running low on coffee beans and needs to schedule a quick delivery. She places an order, and the coffee bean company sends her a request for payment. She responds to the request for payment and pays for the coffee beans right then and there through an app from her credit union, which uses the FedNow service.
Okay, I want to pause real quick here before moving on. What's not explained here is something called digital ID. The Fed, along with the bank, now presumably have a record of what you're buying through your digital ID. Can you see where this is leading to?
The Federal Reserve Bank's FedNow is scheduled for launch by the end of July. FedNow is officially an update to the Federal Reserve's payment processing and settlement system and appears to be a backdoor to creating a central bank digital currency. Private blockchain operator Tassat has partnered with the Federal Reserve's new payment system and will serve as an interface for FedNow. FedNow will also connect with Metal Blockchain, whose CEO and founder claims will allow banks to prepare for an eventual central bank digital currency, along with bank-issued stablecoins. The idea of a central bank digital currency is already hugely unpopular with the majority of Americans. But according to Dale Hauser, it is being set up to destroy alternative blockchain solutions, such as Ripple and Stellar. And if the powers that be are successful in destroying the U.S. economy, then the only other option to accepting a CBDC would be some sort of revolution, which would be nearly impossible, seeing as how divided the populist movement is within the left-right paradigm. Last week in China, the World Economic Forum proclaimed that the entire world needs to switch to a central bank digital currency, with expiry dates and restrictions on undesirable purchases. They proposed using artificial intelligence to censor hate speech and disinformation on the internet, and using artificial intelligence to control a global social credit system that will involve wearable devices with sensors to monitor everyone's actions.
This one bank wants to control every dollar in the world, and they're getting close. The Bank of International Settlements is the central bank of all central banks. They are the ones pulling the strings. However, this highly secretive group has been very vocal about central bank digital currencies, programmable money that can be fully controlled by the government, and they can even set it to expire if you don't use it in time. Over 100 countries worldwide have already started working on a CBDC, and 11 of them have already launched. But now the United States is following suit, rolling out the FedNow payment network this year. FedNow is not a CBDC, but it is the framework required for one to be used. And many believe that this is the first step in their plan to replace cash with a central bank digital currency. If they succeed, these elites will control the flow of the world's money. So buy assets before it's too late.
You control the money, you control the world. And so when you have something like a central bank digital currency, you can just program it in order to promote different political or woke ideologies, whatever it is. So the World Economic Forum, for example, are talking about implementing a carbon allowance, which basically means each individual will be given a certain amount of carbon they are allowed to emit. How do they do this? Well, you program the money. So say, for example, you bought a lot of meat one week. You could have actually reached your carbon allowance. And so when you go to fill up your car, go see family or whatever it is, your money could get declined. And so now what they've done is those unelected elites at the World Economic Forum have implemented their political ideology through a central bank digital currency. It's the most effective way to implement these tyrannical woke ideologies.
Cbdc can improve financial inclusion is through what we call programmability. That is, Cbdc can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contract, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized, for example, for food. So this potential programmability can help government agencies to precisely target their support.
And the one final note I will make is that if you think about the benefits of digital money, there are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability. Units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it, or a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like say ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
Now, I'm going to take it one step further for you, Joe, right? So the vaccine passport infrastructure is in place. But now we know that the vaccine doesn't stop infection or transmission, but the checkpoint Charlie exists everywhere. They bring in digital banking, central banking digital currencies. You've got a scenario now that you're checking in and out everywhere you go using vouchers that are programmed, and you can only spend where you're told you can spend them. There's another word for that, man. That's called the Chinese social credit system. That's what it's called. And anyone who watches Black Mirror will know what I'm talking about. That's that TV show, right?
Yeah.
So what they are telling us, and when I say they, who's they? People in power. That's the head of our economy, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, second most powerful person other than the Prime Minister and maybe the Foreign Secretary in the UK, right? He's telling us, I just played it there for you, he's telling us that's what he, as the UK, the head of the G7, want to bring in for the G7. So a scenario where, like in New York at the moment, because the passport infrastructure is in place, you bring in that digital currency and you've got this total control. And if I'm speaking to you the way I'm speaking now, and my employer or government, you heard that in the quote directly, yeah, deems me as saying or doing something inappropriate, suddenly I can't actually pay to come here and speak to you anymore. My digital currency won't even pay for the ticket because it will be known that I'm coming to speak to you. Sorry, your vouchers don't allow you to purchase that ticket to go and speak to Joe.
And this is where we get into the kind of censorship that we see in social media that is not it's not. You can't have that kind of censorship with the First Amendment in normal discourse.
I'm concerned about the lack of understanding that people have about implementation of things like a digital currency that is centralized, that's controlled by the government.
Right.
That scares the shit out of me.
Absolutely.
Because that's what and Maxine Waters, who has been promoting this, said that we need this to compete with China, which is so crazy.
Yeah.
It's like saying we need communism to compete with communism.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you want to compete with communists, you have to be a communist. Like what?
Yeah.
Like digital currency that's centralized by the state is terrifying because they'll connect it to a social credit score system.
Yeah.
If they connect it to a social credit score system, Tulsi Gabbard, I don't like what you said on the Joe Rogan Experience. We're going to go and eliminate your ability to fly.
Right.
You can't fly. You can't travel. You can't buy gas anymore.
Welcome back. When was the last time you wrote an actual check or bought something with cash? Swiping and tapping our cards and our apps are not just the easiest way to spend money, they're the safest way, unless, of course, we misplace our phones or our wallets, and then it's a nightmare. And soon your hand may be all that you need to buy anything that you can afford and many things that you can't. And the chip gets embedded just under your skin and makes your whole hand a credit card.
And the chip gets embedded just under your skin and makes your whole hand a credit card.
And the chip gets embedded just under your skin and makes your whole hand a credit card.